Hello there. Just wanted to welcome you all here tonight to talk about the mission trips that we did this summer and what God's been doing. I'm just going to open up in some prayer, and then we're just going to sing a few songs. Lord, we just invite you here tonight. We just want to hear from you and see what you've done with our church and with these different locations that we went to in Cleveland and Ashland, and how you love them and how you love us. And we just invite you here now. We just want to praise and glorify you through song, through hearing what you've done, and just through worship throughout all of it. So we just sing your praises right now. Amen.
All right.
So if you'd like to stand, you can stand up.
That you would see me as your child and as your friend, safe, secure in you forever. I pour out my praise again, 'cause you deserve the greater glory, and overcome I lift my voice to the King in need of nothing, and empty-handed I rejoice, 'cause you deserve the greater glory, and overcome with joy I sing, and by your love I am accepted. You're a good and gracious King. Holy, holy, Lord Almighty, good and gracious, good and gracious.
joy I sing. 'Cause by your love I am accepted. You're a good and gracious King. Thousand generations falling down in worship to sing the song of ages to the Lamb. And all who've gone before us, and all who will believe, will sing the song of ages to the Lamb. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all, and the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. And if you've been forgiven, if you've been redeemed, sing the song forever to the Lamb. And if you walk in freedom, and if you bear his name, sing the song forever to the Lamb. We'll sing the song forever and amen, and the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Hear your people sing, holy, to the King of Kings. Holy, you will always be. Holy, holy forever. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all. Your name is the highest, your name is the greatest, your name stands above them all thrones and dominions, all powers and positions, your name stands above them all, and the angels cry, holy, all creation cries, holy, you are lifted high, holy, holy forever. Hear your people sing, holy, to the King of Kings. Holy, you will always be. Holy, holy forever. Just want to invite Millie Veltkamp up, and she's going to kind of give a brief summary of what the night's going to look like. So
what we did, why we went there, and then we're going to have some different people talk about how God impacted their life on our trip, some things that he's been teaching us this past little bit. So I'm just going to start with that. So some of you remember, we're going to back up a little bit, December, January, our trip sort of morphed from a youth trip to an intergenerational trip. And I like to think that we all were called very intentionally, but very individually for lots of different reasons. And I don't think we really saw that until probably this summer. But we are certain that God formed our team. We had high school students, we had probably shouldn't say this, older folks like me. So a mix of people came, but that was an amazing dynamic because we were able to speak into each other's lives and walk through that together. So it was definitely an intergenerational trip. A lot of us were asked from the very beginning, why are you going to Cleveland, Ohio? And I think before we went, that question was a little bit harder for us to answer because we would have given you the website answer, you know, the like, well, let me go look and I'll see why we're going to Ohio because I don't really know, right? Honestly, the real reason we went to Ohio is short and simple. It's because God told us to go to Ohio. I don't think that was something that was really decided by any of us. But I think throughout our time in Ohio, we were in Ohio. We were actually in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. So throughout our time there, we saw the reason why we were there. So immediately when we get there, we noticed right away, especially in the city of Cleveland, that it seems like half of the city isn't even there anymore. And so a good 50% of the houses are empty, businesses are closed. And it doesn't look like they closed last week. It looks like they closed a significant time ago. There's a big steel mill there that's no longer operating. So right away, we're expecting this city in the United States, it's gonna look like most places we've been to, but right away, we're kind of like, this is kind of curious. Why are all these houses boarded up? And not only are they boarded up, in some cases, in some neighborhoods, they're just gone, right? So you can see a city lot, you can see that there was a house there, but there's not a house there anymore. And that happens neighborhood after neighborhood, block after block. And so it's just like there was some sort of something happened and everybody left, and that's exactly what happened. So as a result of that, and I'm not an economic person, but you can see that as people leave, their tax base goes away. And so all of a sudden, their schools are struggling, their infrastructure is really struggling. And so in some ways, there's parts of it that you guys could tell me if I'm wrong, but I would say it looks somewhat like a third world country. It looks very similar to other places I've already been, and that's here in the United States. So clearly, number one, it was a place for us to go to have that moment of, wow, this is a little bit different than Belgrade, Montana. And so you start thinking and asking those questions of yourself is like, what happened? What is, and it is in some areas, definitely a dark place because there's hopelessness. There's people that really are wondering where they're going to go get food. And I don't mean like, in some cases, certainly like, do they have money to buy food? But there are no stores to get food. And if you can't walk or have a car, you can't get to get food. So that was interesting. Also, for us, being in Belgrade, Montana, most of us are generally the same, right? But in Cleveland, there's a giant melting pot mix of people from all over the country, all over the world. So it's a very multicultural, not just culturally diverse, but also economically, all sorts of different things. So it was the ability for us to go see God's heart for people without having to leave the United States. And I would say for most of us, that was a little bit different than even we expected. So the reason we went to Cleveland too is a lot of our refugees coming to the United States are resettled in Cleveland, Ohio. And so envisioning Cleveland is working hard to welcome those folks, to help them have a hand up, teaching them things like English, how to get a driver's license, things that we sort of take for granted that you can imagine if you showed up in another country today, you didn't know the language, you didn't know, you're starting over. You sometimes, what we learned is some of these folks that are our friends that are coming to Cleveland have been sitting in a refugee camp in another country, oftentimes for a year and a half, 2 years, waiting to get here. So they get here, but then they need help. So they're coming to Cleveland. I think part of that is to resettle the community and do that kind of stuff. And so we focused our time there pretty intentionally on that. But honestly, I think our trip started, the things that God was doing started well before we even got to Cleveland. Some of you, and I won't give you every single story because we'll be here all night, but I think it's safe to say that God was preparing our hearts before we ever got to Cleveland, and I'm not sure we really realized that. But we flew to Detroit, Michigan. We got there at 5 in the morning. Got our van, which is kind of funny in itself, drove to Kentucky, because, we thought it'd be a great idea, we'll land at 5, we'll get in the car, we'll drive. So some of us probably don't even remember that day. Jeff and I do, but I don't know, kind of in a comatose state. So when we got to Kentucky, we actually that afternoon went to the Creation Museum. The next day we went to the Ark Encounter. Both of those places I would highly recommend that you go out of your way to go to. I think we were expecting we're going to go to these places prior to our experience, prior to our mission trip. I would say, and you will hear later, how integral those experiences were with our trip. So I think it prepared our heart to be able to be expectant, to watch, to see what God was doing. We stayed in a house, which gave us the opportunity. You think you plan everything, and then God's like, actually, why don't you spend another hour in your devotion time because you need to talk about this now. So we just took the time to do that, and I think that was extremely valuable. So we went to the Ark Encounter the next day, then we drove back up to Cleveland, got to meet some of Charles's family and ministry people on the way, so that was fun too, in Cincinnati. And so then when we were in Cleveland, we spent our time a variety of ways. So we were blessed to be able to lead day camp in the afternoon. So we prepared our lessons, the games, all of that kind of stuff. And so we led day camp in 3 different locations. It was harder than you can imagine to leave some of those places at the end of the day, because even after a few hours, we got pretty attached to those kids. We also have an opportunity. Charles and Grace and Christina went to Scranton Road Ministries. It's a different sort of middle school youth ministry, so they went and served there while we did day camp, which I think was kind of a surprise to some of us when we got there. That showed us we needed just to be flexible and kind of go with the flow. So we did that. We took classes on just racial differences, refugee information. We learned about how to live in a missional way. So they intermixed classes with the day camp that we did. We also spent some time cleaning out a house that they're going to use for international ministry. So we did actual physical work, built some gates, did some things like that. So every day was different. Every day was impactful in its own way. I think those of you that have traveled on a trip like this know that they give you a schedule, but it's just sort of this somewhat of a guide. I don't know if we ever actually did a day like we were quote unquote supposed to, but I feel like we did it every day was as God intended. I would say, and I think you'll hear again too, some of our most valuable time was in the evening when we would plan, day camp for the next day, but really talk and unpack about what was God doing. And I think God did most of the work then, when we could come back and talk about what we saw, what we experienced. And so that's a pretty quick overview of 10 days of stuff, but you're gonna hear more specific stories in a little bit. I would say, pretty excited it's taken us this long to kind of unpack everything that God did. So I think that's pretty great. So, all right. Next.
Hi. I'm Grace. And we're actually going to be doing a slideshow next showing pictures from the missions trip. So.
I'll talk about a man, talk about more than just a man, talk about a fight was darkness versus light. Talk about odds. I talk about real long odds. But that don't mean a thing when you're talking about my God. Oh, Satan thought he had him down. Oh, 3 days later he found out. A soul-saving keys, taking stone, rolling chain, breaking, devil beating, hell defeating hero. Heroes, final score. Jesus won, death zero. I talk about love. I talk about a crazy love. Talk about a cross and everything it costs. Talk about a grave. I talk about an empty grave. A hallelujah morning when the stone was rolled away. Oh, Satan thought he had him down. Oh, 3 days later he found out. A soul-saving keys, taking stone, rolling chain, breaking, devil beating, hell defeating hero. Heroes, final score. Jesus won, death zero. King of kings, Lord of lords, fought the battle, won the war. It's all over, said and done, undefeated champion. King of kings, Lord of lords, fought the battle, won the war. It's all over, said and done, undefeated champion. Oh, Satan thought he had him down. Oh, 3 days later he found out. A soul-saving keys, taking stone, rolling chain, breaking, devil beating, hell defeating hero. Heroes. Oh, Satan thought he had him down. Oh, 3 days later he found out. A soul-saving keys, taking stone, rolling chain, breaking, devil beating, hell defeating hero. Heroes. Final score. Jesus won, death zero.
Okay, and now Grace is going to Grace is going to tell us about her, like the trip.
Okay. So before the trip to Cleveland, I was questioning if I should go there for 9 months as an intern. But throughout the trip and what we did there and the people that we met, and most importantly, through God, I can now say that I'm going to go back to Cleveland. But I don't know if it's for a summer or if I want to do the Trek Year program with Envision and they have partnered with Crown College, and where I would be doing ministry there while taking classes at Crown. And I am praying about what God has for me, and if I am supposed to do the Trek Year or go to Cleveland for 3 months. And I have also gotten closer to the people on my team, and now I consider them all family. And please pray for the workers in Cleveland, and that God would use them to reach the people in Ohio. And also please pray for the families that had to leave their homes because of various reasons in their own country. And please pray that they can find help from Envision Cleveland.
Okay, now Kelly Stone is going to come up and tell us about her.
Thank you, because I'm going to take your 3 minutes. I have 5, and I now have 8. So hang on to your hats, because this is a 3-year story, and I have 8 minutes. So about 3 years ago, I was walking with my daughter up at MSU. Her 2 10-year-olds were at football camp, and she took me up those trails up by MSU. And we were talking, and pretty soon the conversation turned to salvation. And she said, "Mom, I don't want you to worry about my siblings." So I have 6 children. So she was talking about her other 5 siblings. And she said, "Worry about nothing, Mom. Be anxious for nothing." And I said, "You know, babe, I'm not worried about their salvation. I'm worried about their abundant life." And so this is how I explained it to her. Salvation is like a hamburger patty. So when you get saved, God gives you a hamburger patty. But abundant life is like mustard and ketchup and pickles and onions and cheese and jalapenos and whatever you put on your burger. That's abundant life. So we get to Cleveland, and we go to church on Sunday with Sang, who is our missions host. And we get in there, and I can't remember if it was Jeff or Charlie that said, "Okay, everybody shake somebody's hand. Everybody talk to somebody. Be friendly. You know, we're going to be the friendly missionaries." And so we get to church, and everybody's talking and shaking hands and meeting people, and it gets time for service. So we sit down, and I realize that we're all in a row, and Sang is behind us by herself. So I get up, and I go around, and I sit next to her, so I'm behind the team. And just as worship starts, the Holy Spirit hits me. And I am sobbing and crying, and nobody knows but Sang and the Holy Spirit, because I am just, the tears, you know, it drips down on your clothes, and your nose is running. And God says to me, "Daughter, because you are here feeding my children, I'm back home feeding yours, and we're having hamburgers." And I could not stop crying. I cried all day long. And what I realized was God could not dress their burger, okay? They had to choose what to put on their burger. But he says to me, you know, and he's right. I know just what my children put on their hamburgers, and none of them eat their burgers naked. They have lots of condiments on their burgers. So he was giving me a nugget. I want you to know that there are prayers you've been praying for years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes 7, sometimes 40. And maybe you think that he's not hearing you, that he doesn't hear you. He does. And your prayer is in process. I used to have a hard time jumping off of a conversation, and I would rattle on and on and on. And I said, "Lord, you gotta help me with this problem, because I will just talk and talk and talk." And he said, "It's very easy. You just say the end." So before I send the end to you, I'm saying that this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning for God's people. We don't know the day or the hour, but I'm telling you, we know the season. And the leaves are budding on the fig tree. Life is not going to get easier for us. It's only going to get harder. So we need to prepare. You need to sleep in your armor. You need to pray continually. You need to be strong, because it might be that you have to carry someone that you love for this next season. So always be ready. Always pray. Wear your armor. Love your neighbor. Forgive. The end.
Hello there. So building off of what the last two people talked about with the missions trip, God's hand was on our team as we were being sent there, and he spoke, he was speaking to us, he was answering prayers. One of the really cool experiences for us was how he would speak through his word when we were in Cleveland. And one of the ways he did that was the Envision team chose specific passages to talk about / devotionals at the beginning and the ending of each day. And it was cool to see the themes that continued when hearing his word and then lived out when working with the people we worked with. So on the second night of being there, Sunday night, we got there on Saturday. We went to the Alliance Church that was just across the street, and we went downstairs, and Sang, who was the Envision team intern who was living in the house, one of the interns, she talked about John 10, specifically the Good Shepherd passage. And I wanted to read 2 verses from that passage. It's verses 14 and through 16. He says, this is Jesus talking, "I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock with one shepherd." So kind of to give the context of what he's saying in this passage, he's talking to the Jewish people, the Israelites, and the Pharisees are there as well. And they just had this encounter with this blind man, and then the Pharisees were accusing him, even though they just witnessed this miracle. And he's explaining to the Jewish people how he is the good shepherd, whereas the Pharisees and the other religious leaders were not at all real shepherds. He is the true and good shepherd. And so that's how this passage starts. He says, "I'm the good shepherd." And then what's fascinating is he talks about, and there are sheep not of this fold, and he must bring them also. And that would have been wild to the Jewish people at that time. They thought that theirs was the kingdom, and maybe some people on the outside would look to them, but mainly it would be the Israelites. But Jesus is talking about those outside of Israel, the Gentiles, and all the other nations, which they should have known from reading the Psalms and Isaiah and all those books in the Bible, that God is looking to grow his kingdom outward to the entire world. But they totally missed the point. And that was a really good starting verse for the week, because it got us thinking along the lines of, like, Jesus is this shepherd who cares, and he cares not only about the Israelites, he cares about everyone. So going from that, on Tuesday, I was able to join the team that went and did VBS in the neighborhood of people from the Congo in Africa, and it was a refugee neighborhood. And as soon as we drive up, it's not like the neighborhoods here. It's a little bit run down and stuff, but all the kids were excited to see us, and they were running up to us, and they ran up to Michael and Hunter, and they're like, "Are you going to be my brother today?" And that was like super cool to just see their excitement. But we spent the entire day with them, and in the photos, that was that grassy area with the trees, and they were doing the skit for them. But that whole day was just really powerful, because they were just so excited, and they wanted to talk about it when we asked them questions about the story that we did on Jesus walking on water. And so that was really powerful, and that whole day was great. And then when we were leaving, I think Jeff was talking to, a few of their parents, and then we were all getting in the van. But as we're getting in the van, one of the little boys, his name was Matthew, him and this other girl are kind of standing by this fence. And for me, I was thinking in my mind, wow, it's so hard to leave, because it's like, there's always that thought of, like, are they going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? And that's what I was thinking when we were getting in the car, and the little boy, Matthew, was standing by the fence, and he, like, a tears running down his face. And I think in that moment, just a gift from God, kind of an image that he put in my mind, I think, I believe he put this in my mind, of Jesus kneeling beside him with his hand on his shoulder and smiling. And that was just like, to me, that was like, even though we were leaving that area, God was still there, and God's still working there, and he's still working on those kids' lives, because just as we read in John 10, he's the good shepherd that cares for all the sheep, even the ones outside of Israel, even the ones in all nations, even though they might look different, like everyone, no matter their difference, no matter how they were, God loves everyone. And so that was just a really powerful moment, seeing his love for that little boy and for those kids. And that was really, that gave us a lot of peace. And it was interesting because we got in the van, we went back, and Millie came up to me and she said the exact same thing was like on her mind. And that was like a confirmation that, okay, that was God giving us that gift of that image. And so kind of continuing after that, like with that verse, God is missions focused, and mission in the sense that like he cares about all the people, and he wants all the people to know about the good news that Jesus came in order to take our place, in order that we could have reconciled relationship with God. He restores us back to that relationship because he took on our mistakes and paid the ultimate price. And he wants everyone to know that good news. And so that's really powerful. Other verses in the Bible that talk about all the nations, Revelation 7:9-10 is another one. It says, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" So that's looking forward to the future when all peoples from all the nations and all the different languages will be worshiping God, will be worshiping Jesus, and he will fulfill what he set out to do. Another one is in Psalms, so this is the Old Testament. It says, "All the nations you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name." So again, that's just building off of that's building off of the fact that God wants all people to know him. And what's really cool about Cleveland is the nations are coming to Cleveland. The nations are coming to the U.S. So that's a great, like, all around us even. I think more people are moving to the U.S. and even to Montana and all across the nation. There's so many opportunities to meet new people and to look for ways God is working and how to help serve him in going along with what he's doing in the U.S. And another really good passage that is really important to reflect on is in Romans 10. How can they call on him if they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they've never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, "Blessed," or "How beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news." So we all have a role and responsibility in going out and doing so. Not because we have to, but because we want to. We want to serve Jesus. We want to do so out of love for him and for his people and for the sheep. So a couple other things that we can learn from John 10. The people in Israel, the Messiah was right in front of them. He was standing right in front of them. He was talking to them. He just healed a blind man. He was proclaiming that he is the good shepherd, and they totally missed it. They were not paying attention to what God was doing, and they missed it. And that's an important lesson that we need to learn. Okay, God is always working, and it's really important that we stay focused on the present, because that's where God is working. He's working in the present. And it's really important that we know God, we know him relationally. And how do we know him? As Romans 10 talks about, it's by hearing his word. So it's very important that we're aware of what's going on around us and how God is moving and working in the people around us, and what is he asking you to do to serve him and to share the good news that he has for everyone. So I just want to encourage you to be present, be open to what God has in store, continually know him by reading his word, and spending time with him relationally, and taking that step of faith and going where he tells you to go. So thank you for your time. Yep.
Okay, so next I'm going to invite all the people who came on the trip to come sit down, and we're going to do a Q&A. Okay, and so the first question is, share something God has been teaching you as a member of the Envision Cleveland team, either during or after the trip.
I guess I can answer. So kind of going off what I just talked about, in being present, I am a very anxious person, so I tend to think about and worry about the future a lot, and so a whole lot. But through hearing what he was talking about in verses like that in the Envision meetings, and meditating on his word, and being with the Envision team, and being poured into by the fellow brothers and sisters around me, he really taught me a lot about staying focused on the right here and now. And it's kind of funny, we kept seeing the two words, be present, everywhere we went. Like there was a video they showed us about being present. On one of the coffee cups, it was be present. Millie couldn't shut up about being present. So it was like a very loud and clear message from God on that way.
Hello, is this gonna work? Oh, is that what I sound like? It's terrible. I think for me, just to be able to live more in the moment, just to learn to let go of things I can't change.
I would go back to the being present. I think, honestly, you can talk to us later, but I think God was telling Charles and I the exact same thing, like an hour apart, and then we would talk about it and be like, that's kind of crazy weird. But for sure, I would say, for me, God's teaching me to be present, to really just trust him. Definitely has taught me that it's all going to be okay. And just like that ability to completely put on that armor of God. I think if you listen to our discussions and our talk, we talked a lot about the armor of God. What does that look like? Why do we need to do that? We talked a lot about spiritual warfare, and just being able to speak against that has been a big thing.
So the next question is, do you have any unforgettable moments of the trip? So I think for me, it would be one of two things. Either my new brother Matthew from the second VBS, or I guess probably more important thing is on one of the nights, I think it was Tuesday, I gave my life to God.
I think my most memorable part, and I've shared it with lots of different people, but we went to, I don't know the name of the house where Anita was. The community place where kids came, And there was a daycare, so there were smaller kids that were there. And there were going to be some teenagers, we were told. And this Anita gal came out, very loud and commanding and happy to see us, and is like, there's going to be lots of kids here. They're kind of talking about how naughty they are, and if they get into trouble or cause trouble, I mean, she's like, I'll come out and punch them in the face. And I'm thinking it was the teenagers she was talking about for some reason. We were also in the south side, which was east side, that she said was the most dangerous part in Cleveland. So all the kids went upstairs in this house, and I was sent to go get them. And I'm praying, I can't do this. Like, these kids, I'm expecting, she warned us, right? I'm expecting naughty kids, and there wasn't too many of us there to deal with them. So on the way, as I'm walking, I'm praying, you have to do this. I can't do it. You have to work. You have to do your stuff in me, because I can't do this. And so we go up there, and I get these kids, and we come back down, and Millie checks them in. Long story short, she's like, go play Duck, Duck, Goose, or no, where did I get Duck, Duck, Goose? She's like, go play Sharks and Minnows with them. And all these teenagers are there, and more teenagers are coming, and more teenagers are coming, and I'm like, they're not going to want to play Sharks and Minnows. But that was the plan, and so I'm talking to all these kids. Do you want to play Sharks and Minnows? No, I don't run. What is it? You run. I don't run. And I'm getting hands on hips and looks like, they're trying to intimidate me, but God's starting to work. And I determine they're not going to play Sharks and Minnows. I tell Millie, I'm taking them. You're stuck with these. I'm leaving these little ones with you. And she didn't know what to do first. Come to find out, she had the naughty ones. That's her story. But these kids were very hard. Jeff and I was like, Jeff, come with me, because there were some teenage boys. And some were really difficult. They didn't want to open up. And God showed me how to be persistent and to get into their life, basically. One girl, her hands were on her hips, and she was closed down, and she was giving me the stink eye. And all I heard God say, I know it was him, is he's like, that's not who she is. And that's all I said. I was like, that is not who you are, girl. And I said, I've got your number. And all of a sudden, she starts trying not to smile, but smile and not smile. And he gave me lots of opportunities with different kids. One guy just put question mark on his name tag. He didn't want to share who he was. I had to work so hard to get his name, but I felt like buddies with these kids, and they were asking interesting questions. So the long story short, we hung out with them all afternoon. They were supposed to leave at 1. We came back the next day and found out they were supposed to leave at 1, but they had gone in and asked Anita, can we stay until they leave? Which she was shocked, because these kids some of them get paid to come to the center, to stay off the streets. So it was their choice to stay. And that really blessed my heart, because I could tell God was working. One girl said to me after lots of stuff that we did, she goes, you're really nice. And I was like, well, thanks. And she's like, do you talk to your kids this way? And I'm like, yeah. Pulled out my phone and showed her a couple pictures of my grandkids. And after hearing some of Millie's stories, I felt like I didn't share enough about God with them. But God showed me later, you did. You showed them my love. They knew I was able to show them a difference of how they're treated and what they've seen in their lives. And that really spoke to me because they had their story, and I'm like, man, I failed. But I didn't. God was with me, and he totally empowered me to hang out with these kids for 4 hours. I was intimidated. I'm not a youth person, so it was really hard at first. But God showed me how to love them.
So I'll tell my half of that story, which is quite different than hers. So that was one of the days that Christina and Grace and Charles went to Scranton. So I was with Maddie and Hunter and Michael. And so I work with our kids every day, so I'm feeling pretty good. Like, well, I get the little kids. It's going to be fun. I get 4 or 5 hours with them. They were the kids that she was talking about that literally she might need to come get. So our kids were 8, probably 7, 8, 9, I would guess. I think it's safe to say that I used every single ounce of any child development, discipline, behavior thing I've ever learned my entire life. And I feel like I'm fairly experienced, right? I have 4 kids. I'm a grandmother. I've done this a long time. But I've never heard, I do believe we had some kids probably from different gangs, and they were constantly trying to get at each other. And I don't mean like he looked at me. I mean like at one point we're trying desperately to do our lesson. And I hear one kid say, just pretend that they're talking about Muhammad. This isn't actually Jesus. And I'm like, well, game on. We're going to talk about that. So we definitely... at that point decided we're going to share the message that we need to share because that's what God had us there for. It starts torrential pouring rain about that minute. And so I'm thinking, oh, here we go. We have the props and stuff for our skit. They're using them to cover up with it, grabbing them out of each other's hands. And that was pretty mild. So then we went inside. And then I felt like we had them in a room where we didn't have to worry about them running around. But the questions they asked were amazing. They were very engaged, very curious, but there was this constant battle between Christianity and Islam. Sorry. See, one of the things I learned is a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know. But I just felt like, and at one point we have to stop someone because there's literally a colored pencil there. Kid just pounds it into another kid's leg, right? So they're constantly fighting to the degree of punching and choking, and the names and the things that I heard, I haven't heard like even out of some of our youth. It was over the top. So I got an education, but it was definitely that sense of like, I felt like the Holy Spirit was like, don't stop. You just need to love them. And so the day before, they had told us, hey, we're going to add 2 more hours to camp, so go plan 2 more hours of stuff. So Jeff and I went to Walmart at like 6 in the morning that morning because we're like, we got to get this stuff going. We didn't even get through half of what we would have done the day before because it was a constant stop of discipline and behavior. And I'm talking like they just haul off and slap each other across the face. We had one 8-year-old chasing his sister down with a giant rock, determined to pound her in the head. And I'm not exaggerating that. I would say that we definitely, though, really had an impact. I found out later, Michael told me later, when we were upstairs, I was talking to this little boy, his name is Moses. He's been on my heart every second since then. He is convinced that he has to grow up to be a sacrifice for his family. That he knows right now he's going to grow up to die so that his family could be saved by Allah. And so I'm having this conversation with him, and I'm desperate in my spirit, and I'm like, I promise you, you need to know that that is not right. Is that I am, and there was this other little kid there, and he's like cheering me on because he's a Christian in a desperate way. Michael's trying to get my attention, right? And I can't see on the left side of me very well because of my eye issue. Michael's like, hey, trying to get my attention, but Michael's always respectful, so he's not too out there. Finally, I get the attention of the lady. She's like the daycare lady boss, and she's like, excuse me, you need to stop. We do not talk about Jesus and the gospel here. After I had just shared the entire thing, that was an unforgettable moment because I was literally like, God, what did you just do? 10 minutes later, we had to separate them because they were again like literally attacking each other. But I think God definitely was there. He gave us the words to say, what to do. At one point, Michael, you're standing next to me, and he's like, just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. And I'm just like, go play football with him. He's like, okay. And I think Maddie and Hunter, I think you guys were like, what the heck is happening right now? So overwhelmed. So that was the side that we got. I thought, oh, I got the little kids and you got the grown-up kids, but it was a fun day.
So my story about their story, it reminds me of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, how they each have their own stories about one story. And so I, like Millie, had no idea that these kids were Islam. And it was probably a 13-year-old sister, and I thought Moses was like 5. He was itty-bitty. But she berated him constantly. She was constantly yelling at him and telling him he was worthless and slapping him. So they're over playing sharks and minnows, and they do their thing. Millie says, you to the sister, you have to leave. You can't hit him. I won't let you hit him. And so she starts over. I'm sitting on the picnic tables. So she starts over toward me, and Moses walks over toward me, and she turns around and slaps him across the face. And I said, no way, you can't do that. So she walks around this way. He walks over here and comes back with this huge rock, and he's going to hit his sister in the head. And so I grabbed him, and I took the boulder out of his hand, and I said, because he had a little name tag, and I said, Moses, do you know who Moses was in the Bible? Did not know still that he was of a different religion. And so I said, you know Moses in the Bible. And so I told him the story about Moses and how he set his people free and how he performed miracles. And he was dumbstruck. He just sat there. His little mouth was open. He stood still. He just drank in every word I had to say. And like Jody, afterwards I thought, oh, if I would have only known, I would have said something more. I would have done something different. But it wasn't necessary, because the words that Jody and Millie and I spoke to those kids had an impact, because they were backed by the Holy Spirit. Oh, go ahead. Oh, and Christina found the buried treasure, and she's in process of buying the land. If you don't know what that means, read your Bible.
I gave my life to God.
And the next question and last one is, describe something that brought you great joy.
They go into everything. I'll tell you 3 things quickly. Well, 2 are combined, so that'll be easy. Great joy having the opportunity to pray with Michael and Christina both to accept Jesus. Mountaintop moment of my entire life. So 2 different occasions, 2 different nights. I don't know why these conversations happen after 11 p.m., but they do. Absolutely the best experience in the world. The other thing I'm going to tell you briefly, and I'll tell you more later if you want to hear more. You know, sometimes as a trip leader, you come into trips like this and you think, well, I'm keeping track of where we're supposed to be, how we're going to pay for it, who's, you know, if you're me, like who's following what rule and who's not and all that kind of stuff. I don't know, I should expect this now. It should just be what I expect, but I didn't really see that God would continue to work with me. You know, I spent the last 6 months, year, asking God, show me my heart, show me my heart. I want to live for you better. Some of you know that my prayer also included, just show me what I need to do to find the stuff in my heart so that I can get rid of it. So I moved past that, thankfully, a while ago, but part of what I was still struggling with was just hearing that God was there talking to me individually, and a whole bunch of other stuff that you don't need to know about right now or care about right now. But and this is curious because we're sitting next to each other with the same shirt on, and there is a story behind the shirt. We went to, you know, I don't know how much, I don't remember how much you paid to go to the Ark Encounter, right? So we went to the Creation Museum the night before, and they have these shirts at the gift shop, and we're like, that's a weird shirt. Like, there's got to be a story behind the shirt. Why do they have the shirt there? It's an odd conversation to have, too, honestly. We were just like really tired, and we're talking about the shirt. So the next day, we left the shirts there because we didn't have any connection to it. Next day, we go to the Ark Encounter. They give you like the little tourist flyer when you walk in that says all the stuff that's happening. And we're like, Charles is like, Ellie, the group on the shirt is having a concert at 2 o'clock. And mind you, don't take this the wrong way. We are mindful of our time, but we had spent most of the morning talking about God, talking about our skit, really like praying, and like we had slept in, and we really had spent some great time with God. And so we hadn't even gotten to the Creation Museum till right before 2. But it was a very valuable time. So then all of a sudden we're like, let's go to the concert. And half of our team are like, we were finally here and you want to go to a concert for a group and they're like, who is it? We have no idea, but their shirt was at the place the night before. And so our kids, our youth students are like, that's a no, because there's camel rides across the thing. And so they're looking at that. So thankfully, Grace, they had to have an adult because she had to sign their permission. So Grace took them and did camel rides and looked at snakes or whatever you did. I don't know what you did. But looking back now, it just seems really odd, right? So we go to this concert, we go in there. You heard one of their songs in the video now. But you know, at any worship concert where God's talking to you, you're listening to the music, each of us individually have things that God's telling us. And I'm, just to be really real, in my mind, I'm like thinking about some other stuff going on in my life. And I'm like, God, I've been asking you for 6 months. I don't see it. This song is telling me, you know, you need to believe for it. You need to trust that God's doing it. You need to do that. And I'm like, I want to. I know I'm supposed to. But there's this whole mountain of stuff that I really want to keep for myself because I don't think you can do it. Like, that's a conversation in my mind. And I'm going back and forth, and I'm thinking, and Charles, you were sitting on the other side of me. But in this song, and I'm just literally playing because I'm back to my list and my checkbox and all this. And Charles leans, I will never forget this till the day that I die. Outside of Michael and Christina's thing too. He leans over and he goes, I just need to tell you, everything's gonna be okay. Now, you also need to know that Charles had no idea what I was thinking of. Charles had no idea what was in my mind. He hadn't walked through any of this with me. I didn't know Charles that well, to be honest with you. And so in that moment, I knew with 100% certainty that God was talking to me as an individual person, not as a group of us in this room, not as, you know, this person that believes in God, but like individually, like, will you stop trying to figure it out? Because I'm telling you, you don't need to know the details. It's going to be okay. And so I will never forget that. And then later at lunch, it was an odd experience because, again, we're like, we got to keep talking about this. And we're looking around and we're at this place, but we're like, look what God's doing. So you should tell them you're part of that.
Sure.
Because it seems weird. Just one-sided.
Yeah, so we're at this concert, and kind of like Millie, I wasn't really paying attention. I was kind of more just back to that worrying about the future sort of thing. And for the past few months, like, I've been hearing more of this still small voice be like, it's gonna be okay, like, you need to stop worrying about this, and like again and again, he just keeps saying that to me. And I thought it was just a passing thought, but I heard him say, like, tell Millie it's gonna be okay. And I thought that was just like a random thought that would just cross my mind. I was like, okay, that's weird. Totally, I'm not gonna do that. I was like, I'm not doing that. And they kept like coming back into my mind. I was like, okay, that's probably God telling me to do that. So I did that, and then at first I was like, okay, I probably didn't even do anything. Like, I probably didn't affect anything. And then we're going to this cafeteria afterwards, and we're in the line, and we're talking about what God's been doing with like all the missions trips and Ashland and how he's been working there. And Millie tells him about how in the concert like that affected her. And like in that moment I got like goosebumps and like chills, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I told her, I said, literally God told me to tell you that. And that that was a confirmation to me as well, because it confirmed that everything I'd been hearing the past few months was him talking and was him reassuring me that it is going to be okay. And that was mind-blowing. So that was just a really good experience to just see that happen. So. What?
I guess it would just be seeing God work through everyone's life on the trip, just seeing him work through every single one of us. That was really cool and all that.
I think the one thing for me would just be just having that joy serving other people. That's what brought me the most joy, and just to see the kids so happy.
So this was my second mission trip. The first mission trip I took was about 5 years ago. We went to Mexico. And I feel like in Mexico, God directed me. He gave me a purpose, a mission, and that was to be a watchman. So for 5 years, I've been a watchman. It was very comfortable for me because I sat back, I was quiet, I observed, I watched, but I learned. Prior to that, when my kids were small, I used to pray, Lord, I want to slay dragons. I had a man in our church say, you be careful what you ask for. I've seen a dragon and they're scary. And that was a time of my life where I had great fear, and something I still deal with, but I had a chicken. I had a great big rooster, and he used to scare me, and I had a repurposed broom handle that I would use to go out and feed my chickens, and we would sword fight all the way to the chicken coop. And one day I went out to feed the chickens with this broom handle, and God says to me, how can you slay dragons when you're afraid of chickens? So obviously I had some training to do. Before I left, I even talked to Pastor Ron about this recommissioning. I felt like God was telling me that he had something else for me in mind. And so when I got to Cleveland, Charlie gave me this. Will you hold this? So he gave me this bracelet, and it says, Luke 10:19, behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. So Amen. He gave me this bracelet, and to me it was confirmation that it is my season now, not necessarily to slay dragons, but to train warriors. So I appreciate, Charlie, this confirmation.
I always like to follow her because she takes all my time, so I'll only talk for a little while. The end. No, I'm trying to think of something that was, grandiose or whatever, but what I saw with this group, and from the very start, it was a total trust mission trip, because we did not know if we were going to raise money. We didn't know where we were going to stay. We were going to places that we had no idea about. And, to go to a place, you got a mission group coming in, but you can't talk about Christianity? That doesn't make much sense to me. So they did a wonderful job. But I think through it all, what I see is a big trust that we all have now in our God. I think it's kind of embedded in our hearts. And I know for me, I mean, getting back was interesting because, you know, you're way up here high and you come back and you start to go down and you're waiting for those attacks and they didn't happen. Here you were prepared for them and then it never happened. So that was really confusing to me, but we got through it. And the driving was good.
You did good.
You know, you can ride behind those buses and no one bothers you. It was a bus lane. That's okay. We made it. No dents, I don't think. The gas bill's a little high, but we did get to see a lot of the country.
Again and again.
Again and again, yeah. But we did, I know we did bring a lot of light to Cleveland, and that was a blessing for us. So.
Wait, there's one right here. There you go. Yep. Hello? Oh, there it goes.
Okay, probably the kids at Scranton Road, those middle schoolers just brought me joy. Yeah, and I really miss those kids.
This was really encouraging. I suppose it is pretty cool. I could say joyful, but what impressed me was Envision. All the things they do. Kelly and I went to an ESL class. I'm not sure who else went, but she stayed with the English and I went in with the budget class. And there were 3 men in there and they spoke English fairly well, but they knew nothing about money and they were so impressed with all the things they were being taught and eating it up, and it's like things we take for granted. I found out later the English class was like probably pre-kindergarten teaching, like they were learning very minor, simple things. And they take people and have walked them through the whole process, and now these people are serving and doing ministry. I got to walk home with some kids from that park that we were at, and we walked up to their house, and the dad was sitting on the porch, and he was practicing his English writing on an old used envelope, and he couldn't speak English, but where did you say they were from? Congo?
The Congo.
Where he came from, he was a doctor. So he was a very smart man, and he was also something else. I can't remember, a professional. But he had to have his son, he called his son out to interpret for us so we could have a conversation. But their desire they seemed happy, they seemed kind, except for some of those little kids. But that's kind of sad because it makes you wonder how they've been treated to get that way. But the people seemed happy and thankful. We got to go back and give them some cookies and brownies. They snatched those things up. What I wanted to say, though, is that what Envision is doing there to change people's lives is incredible. That brought me a lot of joy and encouragement. And I guess we have some people coming soon to share more about that, so that'll be exciting. They're just not... They're doing incredible work in people's lives. They're doing gardening, people giving them their gardens. They've got some orchards they're planting for the people, and they're poor, like they're so poor. I went to take the foil off the cookies and give them the foil, and they grabbed the foil out of my hand. They wanted to keep the foil too. And but Envision is meeting lots of needs and doing lots of good stuff.
One of the parts that I enjoyed a lot was when we were like going around Cleveland. There was this part that we saw like 3 or 4 times. Yeah, we were going to Lake Erie, and yeah, it was like 4 times. Yeah. We went around the same block around 4 times. Yeah.
You come up here so they can hear you. We should have censored that.
Don't worry, I haven't said off the walls things yet. I'm gonna sit here. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm taking your spot for like 2 seconds. I actually was not on the trip, but just because of how Millie, Charles, and I are, I hear everything through text message. And so I just also want to emphasize really just more backing up what I heard from just Millie and Charles alone. The Sunday that I got to see him, they're like, Alec, we need to have lunch and just talk about this. I kid you not, we were at Kung Fu City. I don't even remember the name of it. Hong Kong City, I don't care. We were there for 5 hours, them just telling me everything that God had done within how many days?
What?
How many days was this trip again?
10.
Like 10 days. 5 hours, talking about 10 days. So my most joyful moment is to hear how God was able to use just a small snippet of time to grow all of these guys more towards Christ.
And there's something I remembered. When Charles talked to this guy at Chick-fil-A, and it turns out that he was a Christian clown. We need to get that in this church. Okay, and you guys can go sit down.
I'm next, right? All right, we're almost done, I promise. We've been very careful at watching the time, even though it might not feel like it to you guys. I just wanted to take a couple minutes. I won't take the whole time because I think you've heard a lot already. But what I wanted to share with you is you just saw 10 days of our summer through our Next Gen ministry and things that are going on here at Belgrade Alliance Church. And so I want to give you the 30-second lowdown on everything that's happened since June up until this point, because I want you to be encouraged by that. I want you to see that we may not be very many of us. We're in Belgrade, Montana, but God is definitely using us in an amazing way. So in June, some of you know that our team went to Ashland, Montana. We partnered with Hillside Alliance Church. Gabe, you can jump up and down. Gabe was there. Yeah. So we left a big chunk of our heart in Ashland, and some of you saw the Ashland sign in the video, so I thought that was, thank you for putting that in there, Michael. It's been interesting how God in my life especially has connected Ashland to Cleveland, two vastly different places, one God saying the same thing. And so that's been pretty incredible to see. So we spent 7 days there. We did VBS every day, very similar. We were able there to, I want you to know that this is the mind-blowing part for me is when God works. He shows up. We've been able to, in the last 6-8 weeks, share the gospel with multiple people, and 4 of those people responded and were saved. That is God and God alone. And that is because someone said to Hess, hey, maybe you should go to Ashland in the Northern Cheyenne. We had some of our parents say, yeah, my kids are not going there, thank you. But I would say that we are definitely going to go back, part of us. And when we talk about missions, we talk about partnership, we talk about, I think all of us that have gone somewhere, you guys would agree if you've gone, it's really hard to go and leave and never think about them again because part of us is still there. The great part about our trip to Ashland means it's like 4 hours, 3 if I'm not driving, away. And so it's really pretty close. And so we have already started talking to some folks, not only at Hillside Alliance Church, but pastor of the Alliance Church in Hardin. There's a ministerial association in that region. So how can we partner with them so we don't have to wait a year? We don't have to wait until we have another team coming. And so we're actually, Saturday, I'm going to go visit them because I miss the people there. And so just trying to discover how can we be on mission in Belgrade Alliance Church. And so we spent a week in Ashland. We were back 5 days. And some of us, I say we, because there's a few of us that did multiples, but we were here a week. Then we went to Cleveland. And then some of you know, we did day camp here for 32 campers during the day. And so that was, we got back on the 15th of July, and day camp started on the 24th of July. So I wouldn't say I'm wise in scheduling, so that's something I may have learned. But we provided most all of our kids that came to day camp had never come here before, and we didn't know who they were. What we were doing is giving them a safe place to be while their parents were working. So they were here from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. We had early drop-off and late pickup, and so those kids were here. Great blessing. We did VBS with them in the morning, and then in the afternoon they could choose whether they wanted to do creative arts or if they wanted to do science and outdoors. And so, again, just an incredible experience sharing the gospel with kids that don't know. I think that we probably now are looking at, you know, we've been asked, can you do 2 weeks next summer? What about PIR days? What about spring break? What about all these other things? And so we are going to continue that because we feel like that's what God's called us to do, to be a light in our valley. So I would just challenge you. I'm not telling you all these things to say that we filled our calendar, we killed ourselves and we're really tired. That's not why I'm telling you that. I'm telling you that because it's fun. We had a great summer. We had a great summer talking about Jesus. I would say, it was not like Life Conference crazy over the top. It was those special moments of one-on-one, three-on-one conversation where God was really working. And so I would encourage you to figure out how you can be part of that. How can you be a light in Belgrade? How can you be a light in Ashland? How can you be a light in Cleveland and beyond? And do it. Some of you right now would tell me, yeah, you don't know that I'm old. I can't do that. Well, I am too. You're not too old. You're not too young. And I promise you're not too busy. Okay, some of you right now are like, I'm just too busy. If that's the posture you're taking, my challenge to you is to get rid of something. Because there's nothing more important. There's nothing more glorifying than having a conversation with someone like Moses, knowing for certain sure that I might have been the only person in that week at least, or in I don't know what time, that's going to tell him the truth because he's surrounded by people that are lying to him. So I would just really look for opportunities as we move forward. Look for opportunities to be involved. You're going to hear some more stuff about Ashland. That's not just something that, our kids are doing, it's something our church is doing, but more importantly, it's something that God is doing. And so I would really encourage you to lean into that, really consider how can you serve. Let's not even talk about going to Ashland. In this building, we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of kids that are really fun to work with. We have a lot of adults that are really craving the word. So how can you get involved? Even if it's for a couple hours, that's our responsibility and that's our calling. And so I would say there is no better calling, but I would also say it's really fun. I don't think that there's anything greater. So with that, we're going to spend about 5 or 6 minutes in prayer. We would like you guys just to pray with us. We would like you to pray for Ashland, for Cleveland, for the kids that came to day camp, for all of those different things. I recognize there's a lot of people in here, so to pray together might be hard. So I would like you guys, I'm going to do this different than we said just because of time. I would like you just to circle up with people in your geographical area. It doesn't have to be your best friend. Just pray with people you're around. We're going to spend the next probably like similar to concert of prayer style, the next 5-6 minutes. Mostly praying for those ministries, the people that are there day in and day out, the people in Cleveland, the people in Ashland that are there every day, that they would have the energy and the stamina really to do what God's called them to do. But I would also ask you to pray for what God is asking us to do here at Belgrade Alliance Church. So if you guys just want to group up and pray together, and then in a few minutes, Charles is going to lead us in another song, and then we'll just kind of close. Okay, so go forth and pray. You guys should know how.
So as we wrap up tonight, I want to just echo the theme that the team said. This is the beginning. In about a month, in September, we're going to have Envision Cleveland coming here to Belgrade, and you're going to get to hear some of the backstory and what God is doing. We are a part of a global movement right now called Envision. We just opened our first Envision site in Tel Aviv. And so it started in Cleveland. And it started with two of my dearest friends. They're the ones that had the vision for it. And so a little church in Wyoming, a church of only, at that time, only 120 people, believed God. And that launched Cleveland, that is now launching around the world. And you're going to get to hear the full story in September. So I hope this is just, will whet your appetite and you'll come back to hear that. What you don't know is what I told Millie. I said, you're going to Cleveland. We're not praying about this. I'm taking pastoral authority and saying that's where you're going. Right? And God worked. So come back in September, third week, and we're going to hear from Jim and Denise Manchester. What's that? Oh, yeah. And we're having ice cream. Right after you worship. That should really help you worship. We're having ice cream in the fellowship hall, right? And so join us afterwards. Charles?
Before we begin, I just want to close in prayer. Lord, we just thank you so much for how you've been with us this summer and how you've been here. And Jesus, we just want to acknowledge that you are the one who's doing all of this. You were the one who brought us together, who brought this church together, who brought us together tonight. And you want us to know how much you love us, how much you care for us, and how much, even in the hardest seasons of life, you're there and you're extending your hand and you're saying, come to me and I will give you rest. And you're offering invitation to deeper relationship with you. So I pray that we can go and know you more and experience you and know how much you love us. And I pray that us as a church would know, as Paul prayed, the depth and the height and the width of your love and how great you are. Thank you, Lord. Amen. So we're going to sing Forever In. If you'd like to stand up, you can. You are good when there's nothing good in me. You are love on display for all to see. You are light when the darkness closes in. You are hope, you have covered all my sin. You are peace when my fear is crippling. You are true, even in my wandering. You are joy, you're the reason that I sing. You are life, in you death has lost its sting. And oh, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world forever reign. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, all creation will proclaim. You are here, in your presence I'm made whole. You are God, of all else I'm letting go. My heart will sing no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name, Jesus, Jesus. My heart will sing no other name, Jesus, Jesus. No, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace, light of the world, forever reign. Thank you all for coming tonight.